Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our April 2nd Tuesday talk. I'm Bob Surridge, and my job here today is to introduce you to our speaker, Ellen Watts Poole. And this is going to, I guarantee you all, this is going to be fun. We're going to enjoy ourselves. And Mary Ann's going to tell us about the story about her family's charter boat business, and that they were actually pioneers of the charter boat business here in Southport. Uh, so Mary Ellen, if you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. And I assume everyone can hear me, and thank all of you for joining.
I'm going to introduce you because I'm going to put up your photo.
Okay. Well, I will tell you when I need the photos up. I will tell you which the photos when I'm ready. Okay. Is that okay, Bob?
Yeah. So you want me to get them up now?
No, I will ask you when to put which one up.
Okay.
Okay. If that's okay with you, does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Mother, Mother Ocean, I have heard you call, wanted to sail upon your waters since I was 3 feet tall. You've seen it all. You've seen it all. These lyrics are from a Jimmy Buffett song, and it brings to mind my memories of the men and women of Southport that made their living from the ocean. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Ellen Watts Poole, and today I will share my family's story, who earned their livelihood from the ocean for over 50 years. Our story begins with my paternal grandfather, Thomas Hewlin Watts. And Bob, please put up picture number 1.
Okay, hold on.
Okay. And this is my grandfather, Thomas Hewlin Watts, and I'm going to refer to him as Hewlin. And I will tell you a little bit about this picture as I go along. Hewlin was a native son of the Southport waterfront. He went to sea at a young age, working on Menhaden boats from mate up to chief engineer. His father, who was postmaster in Southport, bought his son a 28-foot boat in the early 1930s, named the Little Joe. This boat was to help alleviate the hard times of the Depression. Hewlin and his brother Dooney shrimped, gill netted, and hand-lined for fish. They would peddle their catches throughout Southport and would often work for trade, trading their catches for flour, sugar, and fresh vegetables. They also would take people out on their boat when they could and fished in the Gulf Stream, which was 100 miles from shore. This began his charter boat business. He would charge $12 a day. They left at 2 o'clock in the morning. They had no radios, and the only weather report that they used was telegraphed from Wilmington to Southern Standard in Southport. And Southern Standard was the telegraph office, which was on Moore Street. It was often 2 days old before it was ever received, and it was posted on a board there. My grandmother, Annie Mae, Hewlin's wife, would say, "Why they never drowned, I will never know." Over the years, Hewlin got bigger and better boats, and he built a summertime charter business in the Southport area. Towards the end of the Depression, my dad, who was 14, was old enough now to go fishing on the weekends and in the summer when he was not in school. Then came World War II. During the war, there was a ban on coastal activity. There were blackouts in seaside towns, shore patrols, and German submarines lurking off the coast, frequently torpedoing freighters, tankers, and any other luckless civilian boats. Hewlin decided to go in the U.S. Navy, and after graduation, my dad, Basil, followed. He went in the Coast Guard. They both served their country and used their knowledge of the sea. Hewlin, my grandfather, was stationed at the shipyard in Newport News, Virginia, and Basil, my dad, was assigned to Charleston, South Carolina. After Hewlin was discharged, he continued working at the shipyard, but then he returned home to Southport and continued to shrimp and fish in the inland waters and coastal estuaries. The ban was soon lifted. Basil was discharged from the Coast Guard, and they began taking out charter parties again. The charter boat business was now working again. They bought 2 new boats. The first, Eidolon, and you will hear that name a lot during my story. The Eidolon, which was an old yacht, and the Botfly, named from a fly which is to be the fastest fly around. And picture number 1 that is up is you see the date on it as October 1949. This is a picture. The Southeast North Carolina Association of Anglers had a fisherman's rodeo, and Hewlin entered it with a gentleman that was a young dentist out of Charlotte. His name was Elliot Motley, and they fished for sailfish, and their fish won first place. Dr. Motley received $5,000 in cash, and Hewlin received $1,000 in cash, and it was presented to them at a ceremony by Governor Cherry of North Carolina. And this was in 1947. Hewlin wanted to shrimp as well, so in the early 50s, he built a shrimp boat, and he named it after himself, a nickname from childhood, the Old Crow. In the winter of 53, they went all the way to Key West looking for shrimp. This was Annie Mae's first time on a boat. This was my grandmother. She was 50 years old. And Bob, please put in picture number 2. And this is my grandmother, Annie Mae, on the back of the shrimp boat with one of her grandchildren. She was 50 years old, first time on a boat. And I will say this is the only picture I have of her wearing pants. She has on jeans on the back of the boat. And I never saw her in anything but a dress. I asked my brother, who is 6 years older, and he says he never saw her in pants or slacks either. She always wore a dress. Like I said, she was 50 years old the first time she went on the boat, and she was terrified of the water. Hewlin said she was so afraid of water that he was surprised she ever got in a bathtub. Excuse me while I have some water. The next story is easy for me to remember because I was born in January 1954. They went shrimping in Key West and they did okay. But they became disgruntled because they left Southport. And once they got back, they said they would never leave again. I was born in January 54 while they were in Key West, and my dad returned home by bus. When Hewlin left Key West shortly after, he called Basil up and asked for his advice. So he called my dad up, asked for his advice. He says, I have a firm offer of $28,000 to sell the Old Crow. And my dad's response was, what? You haven't sold her yet? So now the Old Crow was sold. They were all back in Southport. And the decision was made to go in the charter boat business in a big way. The Old Crow was sold along with his 2 other boats. the Eidolon, which was an old yacht, and the Botfly. The money was taken from the sale of these boats, and 2 boats were built, the Eidolon II and the Eidolon III. These boats were run by my dad, Basil, and by Hewlin's son-in-law, Smitty, husband of Dot Schmidt, my dad's sister. And I will interject that Dot did a book about the cemeteries. So if any of you have read that book or owned that book, my dad's sister did write that or put it together. Smitty worked on the boats as well until the early 60s. Shortly after this time, after the Eidolon II and III were built, Hewlin built another boat, the Eidolon IV. This was, he said, for himself. He would run this boat. And I have a picture, picture number 3. It is of the Eidolon II. And this is as she sailed from Harker's Island coming to Southport in the river. These boats were named the Eidolon because from a marketing standpoint, it was assumed that this was a good thing to do, to continue with the Eidolon name because people recognized it. These boats were built in 1954. They are Harker's Island boats, and they were built by Mr. Gillikin of Harker's Island. I had the pleasure to talk to his grandson only in the past year, who still lives in Harker's Island. Annie Mae continued to be the shore captain, as she was called, because she booked fishing parties for the family boats. And when our boats had no vacancies, she would refer those charters to other boat captains in Southport. As I said, the Eidolon's name was kept because it was said that people would call the telephone operators and ask to speak to the lady in Southport that could get them fishing on the Eidolons. And would you show picture number 4 of the Art Newton print? This is a picture of the boats. The first 3 boats are the Eidolon II, III, and the 4. This is in the Old Yacht Basin, and this would be from Brunswick Street, would be the street that you would be on of where they were docked. Art Newton did paint this. It is a watercolor. The original hung in my grandmother and grandfather's house for as long as I can remember. And now the original is with my brother, Basil. I do want to point out that in 1957, and this picture was done in 1955, in 1957 was the height of the charter boat business. There were approximately 20 boats in Southport for charter. And I do want to note that by 1977, the number had dropped to 6. So in 20 years. Next is picture number 6, and picture number 5, and it is my dad and Smitty. My dad is on the right, and his brother-in-law is on the left. You can see the boats in the background, and the fish that they are holding up again are sailfish, which it was quite a sport for people to catch a sailfish. And would you please show picture number 6? Okay, in this picture, I will point out again, the fish are sailfish. The gentleman on the left at the top, that is my dad, Basil. Under him is Walter Lewis, who was captain of the John Ellen. He owned his own boat. On the right, the top is David Adams. The name of his boat was the Patricia, and kneeling in front of him is my grandfather Hewlin, and of course our boats were the Eidolons. I want to talk about sailfish because it was such a big thing that everybody wanted to catch a sailfish, and they would often have these fish mounted and everybody wanted to know who caught the biggest sailfish and how wide the span of the fin was. They were very beautiful fish. It was such a delight for someone to catch a sailfish that when the boats were coming in to shore at the end of the day, if they had a sailfish on board, they would run up a white flag on the boat lines so that everybody in the community would know that they had a sailfish, and people would all go to the waterfront to see it when they came in, and the photographers in the area would all go down to the water to make sure they got pictures of it. The white flag that they would run up on the lines of the boat was never a real flag. It was often a white handkerchief or a white t-shirt to let everybody know. By this time, in the early 60s, the business was expanded again by buying their own docks. They moved from Brunswick Street to the yacht basin, and they had their docks in the area of that picture's for later. Thank you. They had their docks in the area of the old yacht basin, kind of between Provisions and where Yacht Basin Eatery was. In 1963, Hewlin died at an early age of 61. Annie Mae continued working parties, booking parties, as she was still the shore captain, and Basil continued managing and running the business. In the mid-60s, Basil expanded the business again. Charter boat business was limited to the summer and early fall when people could go fishing and it was not so cold, and the type of fish they caught. In the wintertime, starting then, in the winter, beginning of the winter, my dad would get the boats ready to commercial fish. They would catch blackfish, which are black bass, and they would catch them in a trap, which was a square. It looked like a box. It was square, made out of hard fishing material, and it had a hole in it, so the fish would go in. They were trapped in, and then they couldn't swim back out. So that's what they used to commercial fish. There was a fellow charter boat captain in town who had a fish house. And what they started doing is they would take those black bass and they would ship them from that fish house, and they would truck them in refrigerated trucks to New York City, and they were sold to Fulton's Fish Market in New York City. So that's what they did in the wintertime to continue to make a living with their boats. By 1968, Basil built a larger boat, the Eidolon. And now would you show the picture? I have a picture of the Eidolon in the snow, and they are down on the docks at the old yacht basin. You will see her. My dad built this boat himself with Herman Sellers, who was a local boat builder. I will say that the Eidolon was 55 feet long. The Eidolons 2, 3, and 4 were 44 feet long. The smaller Eidolons could carry 6 people fishing, and they required a captain and a mate on the boat. The big Eidolon, which is the picture here, was 55 feet. He could carry more people. He was licensed by the Coast Guard to carry 12 people, but he normally did not carry more than 8. And then he would be the captain, and then he would have a mate with him when he went out fishing. In 1971, upon returning home from the U.S. Navy, my brother Basil worked on the charter boats and commercial fished with the business for a few years. Then he began his apprenticeship as a Cape Fear River pilot, of which he has retired. In the early 70s, Basil, my father, expanded the business again. He built a retail seafood market, which was run by my mom, Ellen, and his sister, Dot. the business continued. Basil had plans to build an additional boat. He had bought all of the wood that was needed to build her with. In 1983, my dad died suddenly at the young age of 58. It was a difficult decision, but the boats were sold and the fish market was closed. The story and long history of Watts charter boats came to an end. The Big Eidolon was later bought by Leroy Potter of another long fishing family in Southport. Leroy converted her and renamed her the Cape Point. And she still sits at the yacht basin today and is run by Leroy's son, Royce. And please show picture number 8. And I'm sure all of you have seen the Cape Point down there if you've been to the old yacht basin. And Royce ties her up about a third of a block from where she used to sit. And now he has a retail seafood market in the water. And so that's the end of my presentation. I do have some other things, a couple other stories I want to tell. And now is a good time, I think, Bob, to take questions.
Okay, so if you have a question, unmute yourself and we'll get.
So I have a couple questions. We didn't get the Facebook. I did something wrong with the Facebook Live feed, Mary Ellen, so it didn't go on Facebook Live. We'll have to put it up afterwards. So
It's okay.
Didn't know. I don't know. It says it's on Facebook, but I can't find it.
Okay.
So I wanted to understand. So the Eidolon that your grandfather built, that, right? Or it was your dad?
Okay. The big, okay. All
The
of
big
them were
one.
named Eidolon. The big one, my dad built it.
Okay. And that
And
was
he built it in 68.
68. And that's a wooden boat, right? I mean, that's what it's made out
Yes,
of.
all of these were wooden boats.
And how did he learn? By working with Mr. Sellers, like on the fly as he was making that boat, or had he made built boats before?
No, he learned on the fly, but over the years, repairs. He did all of the repairs, and they would make smaller boats just for fun, and
Really?
like skiffs and other boats. So it was kind of, I guess, inherent that he learned that, and they would do repairs on the boats. And then he worked with Mr. Sellers, who was a boat builder.
Okay.
And I will say too that my brother, when he was home before he went to Vietnam, he actually helped them work on the boat when he was home from leave. So it was a family. It was a family thing that everybody worked on the Big Eidolon, as it was referred to, and it was a wooden boat, as the other ones were.
And that's wonderful that it's still running. It's still,
yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? Because wonderful. It was built in 68. So yeah. I figure out how old that is.
More than 50.
Yes, 58 years old.
That's fantastic. And then I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about hand lining. Is that
hand lining? Yes, a lot of people still will fish by hand lines because of the type of fish that they want to catch. But when they did hand lines, this was during the Depression and nobody had any money. Rods and reels were probably around, but nobody could afford it. It was much more prevalent when they started charter fishing that they would get rods and reels to have on the boat so that people could use them. But this was during the Depression, and they did not use rods and reels.
So I'm just trying to envision, and I know you explained it to me before, but I still don't really know.
That's okay.
So they had a fishing pole, right?
No. They took the line in their hand.
In their hand.
And they baited it, and they dropped it over, and they pulled it back in with their hands.
Wow. And
And
but they
I
kept
mean, these were really men. So
yeah.
they pulled it in with their hands and took the fish off and put a bait on it and put it out again.
Wow, that is
Yes.
phenomenal.
My dad said when he was a young boy and would go out fishing with my grandfather my great uncle, his uncle, he said that it would seem like smoke would be coming out of their hands. They were so fast.
Wow.
So they yes, it was line fishing.
Wow. And that was common. Most people in Southport did that, or was that was just the way you fished?
That's how you fish. Well, that's how they fished. It was during the Depression, and I would suppose that if there were other fishermen, that could be how they fished too. They also use nets, gill nets, where you throw the net out. It's like a circle. It goes down, it picks up the fish, and you pull it up, and it collapses, and then fish are in the net.
Wow.
But you catch different fish different ways.
Right. That is some tough stuff. So
yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
It was a hard life.
That is a hard life. That is very.
Yes. And then when they come in, they peddle those fish, and most of the time what they received was something to eat: sugar, flour, fresh vegetables.
So they would trade the.
Yes. So everybody in town, I would say, had a balanced diet.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Other questions? I didn't mean to hog all the questions.
Oh, no, thank you, because I'm sure other people were wondering.
Mary Ellen, when in your presentation, you talked about in 1970, there were over 20 party boats in the yacht basin.
No, in 1957,
57.
there were approximately 20 boats, and by 1977, it was down to 6.
Okay, so no fish or no,
I think depending on who you talk to, I think that probably what happened in the 70s, gas went up really high. So, but of course, our businesses continued. They went up on the price of what it was to take people out fishing. But something else happened too, is that that a lot of industry came to the area where people could find jobs that paid well, and that they didn't have to worry about what to do in the wintertime to make a living. So I would say that was probably some of it as well.
So there were easier ways to make a living by the 70s, maybe.
Yes.
Place like Sunny Point was taking some of those fishermen.
Yes, Sunny Point. In fact, in the wintertime, for a while, my dad actually worked at Sunny Point. He was the captain of one of the fireboats there. He would work that in the wintertime, quit, go back to work, and then work again when in the wintertime if they needed someone.
I use the word party boat instead of charter boat.
They're interchangeable, and I will explain that. You and I have talked about that. I was going to put it in my notes, but I did not. A lot of times people would say party boats because you'll see a lot of especially in the 70s, people had larger boats, and they called them head boats because if you wanted to go fishing, you went by yourself, got on the boat, paid a price, and you went fishing. Our boats and the boats in the area were party boats because one person would book the boat and they would bring their party with them. So it would be whoever booked the boat with a party of 5, there could be up to 6 people in the party. So that's why it was called a party boat.
And I have on the screen the Art Newton
yes,
watercolor print. I would just want to mention that we have about 15 Art Newton's prints for sale through the Historical Society, and
Mhm.
they're all gorgeous, depicting Southport in the 1950s and early 60s.
Yeah, in fact, I want to note on this, this is the Eidolon 2, 3, and the 4, which were docked at Brunswick Street before they bought their own docks further up the yacht basin. Notice that the Eidolon 2 and 3, the portholes of this one are round, and they're more square or rectangle in the other boat. And my brother says as a young child, he could always tell when our dad was coming in because he knew which boat he had and which was the shape of the portholes.
So your grandmother was, you said she was the one who was so afraid of water.
Of water, yes.
Right. Now, did she, I don't know, maybe you were too little to remember, but did she worry, did that extend to her husband and her son and her grandson going out on the water? Did she worry when they were out that they,
yes,
until she saw them come back in? Did she?
Yes, she did. And it was always a worry. And I will say too that we were brought up with a great respect for the water. So with that, and I think that's probably why they were able to do what they did, especially in the early days. It was always a respect for the water. I do have a saying that my grandfather Hewlin used to say. He would always say, "Blow ye winds and starve old crow to death." So that was when the wind would blow, which the weather was bad, they would not go out fishing.
Okay.
So that was his saying, that if the winds blow, it would starve crow to death. And that's what his nickname was from childhood. But yes, and then again, we had hurricanes. Excuse me. In fact, 1954 was Hazel. And these boats, they had all three of these boats during Hurricane Hazel. And what they did is they took them up to the area of in Southport of Smithfield Woods. You know, the river goes kind of back there. He took them in they took those boats in the outlet, in the inlet through there, and stayed there during Hurricane Hazel. So during the hurricanes, they left, and they always stayed with the boats to make sure the boats were protected.
So your dad and your grandfather, or your dad was, no, you were both there. So your dad and your grandfather took the boats, and then your mom
and whoever worked on the boats with them, because they would have other captains and a mate. So the crew would go and stay with the boats during the hurricanes.
So at Hazel, which was the really bad one, your mom had you at like 9 months old, and your brother who was 6 and yes. Her husband and father-in-law, they all left.
Right.
And she had to handle it on her own. Did she ever tell you stories? Do you know how she got through that?
I know that she went to, we lived at the end of West Street in Southport, close to where the marina is now. We lived there. So we were closer to water. So we went to my grandmother's house and stayed there. And my brother says that during the eye of Hurricane Hazel, he and my cousin, who was the little girl on the back of the shrimp boat with my grandmother, that they actually went outside and stood in the road and played in the water, and they had water up to their knees. But wow. Yes, they would stay and wait for that hurricane to be over for them to come back home with the boats.
Wow. Wow. That must have been a very scary time.
Mary Ellen, did you ever go swimming in the yacht basin?
No, sir. No.
That's dangerous, right? My girl said that's very dangerous.
Well, I will tell you this. My mother was from South Carolina. My dad was in the Coast Guard and went to Charleston during World War II, and he met my mother in South Carolina. And she was as afraid of the water as my grandmother was. And my mother always told me, now my brother was a different story. He went swimming down there. My dad made sure he knew how to swim. My mother told my dad he could not, I was not to go swimming. And she always told me never to go in the water until I learned how to swim. That was her way of making sure I didn't go in the water. But I will tell you this, she did put me in swimming lessons in a pool with the YWCA. And I probably at least 3 times I could never learn to swim. And only after I retired, and this was only about 7 years ago, I taught myself how to swim from the instruction that I received as a child. And I think I even took lessons again one time as an adult, and they still could not teach me to swim. But anyway, so yeah, I guess the women in my family were afraid of the water. But no, I never went swimming in the yacht basin. My brother did. My cousin that was his age, she did, but Mary Ellen did not.
More questions? I see Catherine out there. You must have a story related to the yacht basin.
I never went swimming in the yacht basin. I thought it was dirty.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And Miss Trudy wouldn't let you go anywhere.
No.
No, she would not. She was like my mother. We were not allowed to go in that water.
The only story I have about the yacht basin is that the Potters, it was Eleanor Potter and what was Madeline's father's name?
Smutty.
They had it was called the Port and Seaboard. Is that?
Yes.
A little fish market about where that picture is of the Eidolons.
Yes.
And their daughter, Madeline, but we called her nickname was Punk. We played down on the docks. And one day we were playing and this porpoise came up. It looked like something from SeaWorld. And it came up and it came out of the water and did the back, you know, how they kind of dance. And I just felt like I had been on Flipper. That was my first experience.
Yeah. I have a picture, and I think I showed it during another presentation I did of the coloring books. I have myself and my cousin, I was a young teenager, probably 12, standing on this dock with an eel that I'd caught. We were fishing with a line by hand, and I caught an eel instead of a fish, but I didn't put that picture in this. Are there any other questions before I did want to tell just a couple of things before I end my presentation. Okay. And again, I really want to thank all of y'all for being here today and listening to my story or our story. Something I want to encourage everybody to write your own story for your family. It's been amazing the information that I have learned, memories that were brought back. And I do want to thank my brother Basil for helping me with these memories. He spent a lot of time with my grandfather and my dad when he was young. And so he knows a lot of the information. And of course, he fished with them. So I learned a lot. He answered all my questions. He explained to me about fishing. He explained to me about knots and miles and all of that information. So I want to thank him and my sister-in-law, Greta, who anytime I ask for a picture or an article, she is very organized, unlike me, and she knew exactly where it was. So she would pull out a file that had what I needed on it. So I have to thank them. And encourage you to write your story. You know, I found that myself, I was never interested in history until I got older. So I wish that I'd asked this question. So please talk to your children, talk to your grandchildren, talk to your siblings, and write your own story so it'll be available when your family wants to know about it. And I do want to tell a story that I learned, I had never heard it, that my brother told me just this week. The Eidolon 2 that's in this picture that's up, after my grandfather died in 1963, it was several years later, the boats were taken and put up so that they could get underneath them to take the scales off and to paint them and to get them ready for the summer again. And so what happened, the paint gets so thick on those boats that after 5 or 6 years, you need to take a blowtorch and go over that paint before you paint it. And then you take a putty knife and take that paint off so that you get to close to wood again. And you'll see all the layers of the paint that you're taking off so that you can paint it again, because the paint will get so thick. My dad did not know this, but when he was taking the paint off of the Eidolon 2, which was the first boat that my grandfather had built, and he had built in 1954, there was a different name on it. It was not the Eidolon. So my grandfather obviously never told my dad. My dad was shocked. The name of the boat was Frau Anna, German for Lady Anna, after my grandma. I never knew the story. I don't know if she ever knew the story. I had never heard it. My aunt, Dot, only learned of it after my dad died, when she was talking to my brother about the boats and their name. So I find that this was an interesting story to find out at my age of 67 about a business that had been in my family for this long and was known by the name of Eidolon. So that was a story that I found out that I never knew. And like I said, my aunt did not know, my dad did not know until he found it in the 60s after my grandfather died. So that was the story. That's what I found out. That was a surprise to me. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Can I ask one question?
No, that's it. Sure.
So at one point he owned 2 boats. He had that original Eidolon, the one you're talking about,
yes,
and the Crow.
And the botfly. No,
okay.
The botfly. The old Crow was a shrimp boat. Okay.
Because I was just thinking the Crow was named after him, and then the Frau Anna would have been named after his wife.
Yes, right? Yes.
Okay.
And see, the Eidolon was already named. He did not have those boats built. He bought the first Eidolon. It was already that name, and the botfly. They were already named. So he never named a boat until the Old Crow, which was a shrimp boat. And then when he sold the Old Crow and expanded the business in 54. And then all of the boats were named Eidolon after that. It was the 2, 3, 4, and then my dad built the big Eidolon, which is now the Cape Point. Okay. In closing, did anybody else have a question from that? Okay, thank you. In closing, I want to leave you with this comment. People always ask you what your parents taught you that you look back on in life, and what was important and what you thought about. My dad would always have this saying, and I've shared this saying with many of my friends and colleagues over the years. He would always say, and because he was a fisherman, you might know it was about the environment and fishing. He would always say, it's a hard wind that doesn't blow somebody some good. So from this saying, that's how I think he lived his life. And that's how I've tried to live mine, to always look for the good side of whatever life gives you. And so that's the end of my story today. And again, I appreciate everybody for coming today and listening.
Thank you very much, Mary Ellen. And we appreciate you telling your story. And I just love to listen to the stories about old Southport. You know, even though I wasn't here, but you can always, it seems to me, you can always, even if you're not from Southport, in some part of your mind, you're relating it to an experience in your lifetime. So
Exactly. Families are families and memories are memories. And especially when you look back at those hard times that people had and you just admire how they persevered.
For sure. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you all again soon. And Diana, I have those materials ready to bring back to you. I'll call.
Can I just say, so next Monday is Mike Royals going to be telling Southport stories, right? Stories, Southport storyteller, next Monday evening at 6. Is that, I'm looking to Bob to nod your head that I got it right.
Oh,
okay.
Bob over here, you're looking over there.
Okay, sorry, I'm not looking in the camera. I was looking at you. You're over here. And so Southport Storyteller will get more stories about Southport during that time next Monday evening. And then on next Tuesday, I will be talking about the Wilmington massacre and coup of 1898, which seems to become more and more relevant all the time. So, so hope we'll see you guys next week.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you again, Mary Ellen.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's good to see everyone.
Great job, Mary Ellen.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And Bob, I will tell you, I think Catherine and I figured out by Sonny Dozier, we might be kin of each other by marriage after Travis did his talk. Catherine found some pictures of my dad's mother. And then we were looking at stuff and we found out somebody in the family was married to one of her kin people. So anyway, so I've got to get with Catherine and Miss Trudy and figure that out. So
well, that's fun.
So I'm going to be asking Liz, I'm going to be joining ancestry.com to look some more through some stuff.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you need any help or you want me to look up anything, and I think the Historical Society has an Ancestry account, right, Bob?
Yes.
So,
okay.
So there you go.
Okay.
The Historical Societies. But yeah, if you need any help looking stuff up, that's exciting.
It is. Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.